Well, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you may be in the world. Welcome to the latest edition of the ACSA and Craft Spirits Magazine's Craft Spirits Roundtable. I'm Jeff Cialetti, and I'm editor-in-chief of Craft Spirits Magazine, and I'll be your moderator this afternoon. Craft Spirits Magazine is American Craft Spirits Association's bi-monthly digital magazine and is the unparalleled resource for in-depth insight and intelligence for the entire craft spirits universe. I'm hearing some kind of static in the back. Um, if someone's got their microphone on, could you mute? Thanks. All right. Sorry. Anyway, the magazine features the information analysis that small independent spirits producers and allied businesses need to operate in today's complex craft beverage market. Today, we're going to focus on some of those independent producers that have successfully integrated coffee and tea into some of their products. But before I introduce them, I have just a few housekeeping items for you. We very enthusiastically invite your questions for our panelists today. If you have a question, please write it in the chat and we'll try to get to all of your questions either at a natural break in the program or about 10 to 15 minutes before the end of the webinar. You might also notice that you've been muted on entry and your video function has been disabled. We ask that you remain on mute for the duration and communicate only through the chat function. And if you want to revisit today's program or recommend it to others, it will be archived at both AmericanCraftSpirits.org and CraftSpiritsMag.com in the coming days. Now let's meet our panel. First up is Bob Dillon, owner and distiller at Dismal Harmony Distillery in Morristown, New Jersey, just close to my old stomping ground. Dismal Harmony has the distinction of winning Best in Show, among other medals, at ACSA Spirits Competition last year. And it was only Dismal Harmony's first year of operation when they did it. So the distillery won it for their Vidisha's Masala liqueur. Can't wait to see what they enter this year. Next up is Erin Lee, who is head distiller at Few Spirits in Evanston, Illinois. Erin joined Few in 2023, right after graduating from the inaugural class of the Step Up internship program. She rose through the ranks to become head distiller barely a year and a half after joining the company. And what's more, she's a certified tea sommelier, so this is right up her alley. And finally, we welcome Colin Spoelman, co-founder and distiller at Kings County Distillery in Brooklyn, New York. He's also the author of The Guide to Urban Moonshining and Dead Distillers about American whiskey. His latest book, The Bourbon Drinker's Companion, is a travelogue through American whiskey distillery by distillery. But they can certainly do a better job introducing themselves and their spirits than I can. So I'm going to hand it over to them and have them tell us more about them. We'll go in reverse alphabetical order and start with Colin.
Uh, Great. Thanks, Jeff, for that introduction. I'm Colin Spoelman of Kings County Distillery in Brooklyn, New York. We have been around for 15 years, and I grew up in Kentucky, and that's theoretically how I got interested in distilling, though it was really only after moving to New York, and people assumed that I was a distiller because I was from Kentucky, that I decided to call their bluff and become a distiller. Um, Kings County really is kind of, if we could position ourselves in the craft landscape, we're probably is in as being in the most international facing city in the United States. We kind of borrow from international distilling tradition to make bourbon, rye, single malt, and Irish style whiskey. But we also make a coffee whiskey and some other whiskeys, a grapefruit jalapeno, moonshine, and a spiced whiskey.
Great. Erin, you're up.
Hi everyone, my name is Erin Lee and I'm a self-declared tea nerd. I studied tea for about 2 years through the Tea and Herbal Association of Canada before joining the spirits industry. Like spirits, tea is an endless learning journey and I still continue to learn more about tea till this day. Along the way, I kind of discovered that tea is a really nuanced agricultural product in which terroir and process changes like controlled oxidation and roasting, which is not so different from roasting uh, grain or toasting casks in whiskey, can completely change the taste of the finished product. I'm now head distiller at Peace Spirits, where we predominantly make bourbon and rye whiskey, and along with a few experimentals in the mix. We've been crafting craft spirits here since 2011. And because I'm not the first tea nerd on staff here at Few Spirits, back in 2020, we launched the Mortal Rye Whiskey, which incorporates a Dansong Oolong from the Phoenix Mountains of China, and it's since become part of our core range. We also, I had the privilege of helping develop uh, and launch a product with the Smashing Pumpkins using a rose-scented black tea that we released last year. And I think we launched about 5,000 six-pack cases across the US of that with an additional shipment to Europe. So it's been pretty exciting working with my passions of tea and here at Few.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin. And now Bob.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Dillon. I'm owner and distiller of Dismal Harmony Distilling in Morristown, New Jersey. Um, my resume is not quite as deep as my fellow panelists, but our focus at Dismal Harmony, we sell a broad range of products from sourced and produced base spirits, but what we really like to focus is on liqueur. We think it's an underserved category, certainly in the United States. It's a category that when you think of the great liqueurs, you think of Europe. You trace the history, you end up in France primarily. And we're hoping to bring that category to the United States. The way I came to tea in particular is my wife and I were walking through the woods here in New Jersey, and we were attracted to this. There was this fragrance, and we followed it, and we found this tree that turned out to be called the New Jersey tea plant. And it was what the colonists in the U.S. drank when the colonies were cut off from import, and it was the closest thing they could find in an indigenous plant to tea. And I set off to develop a gin around that. Ended up buying about $10,000 worth of foraged New Jersey tea, which should have been my first clue. And ultimately, the gin didn't get through the TTB because learning experience for me, it's not approved by the FDA. So to keep that recipe, I pivoted to black tea in that particular product just to get because it's a note. And my focus is not quite as fine as Erin's. Right? We want that note in a broader spectrum of flavors, and so black tea allowed us to keep that recipe. So that's how we came to tea. But people do like our gin with tea, and for us, coffee. You really can't serve the public if you don't have an espresso martini, and that compelled us to create a coffee liqueur. And yeah, we'll get into some of the details of that. But so that's how we have those products. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Thanks, Bob. Well, we've got three people here who have used tea and or coffee in different ways, so we're going to get sort of a diversity of opinions on this stuff. I want to hear each of your processes as detailed as you want to get with it. So first, I want to go with Erin. Talk about some of the tea-related products that Few's done. You mentioned the Smashing Pumpkins collaboration, and then you've also got Immortal Rye whiskey. They're both proofed with distinctive tea varieties. Tell us about that process involved with each of those, what it took to get them just right, and what each of those teas brings to the finished product.
Sure. So when selecting a tea to work with, I usually like to start with the aroma, so I can kind of quickly determine if a spirit and tea smell nice together. Because if they don't smell good, then I'm not even gonna bother going any further. And if they do smell good, I just usually make a quick brew of the tea, try and get familiar with how it's tasting, taste the tea and the spirit that you're thinking of working with together, maybe even add a few drops of the tea into the spirit and see how they mingle. And then you should also consider the weight of your flavors. Like you wouldn't want to pair something really super light and floral like a white tea with something really bold and with as much of a cask I guess influence like bourbon because the flavors will probably get lost. So for each of the releases that we created, we worked with like several different potential teas and created some small scale trials. And then we ultimately narrowed down just by tasting and seeing what worked well together. And then so for Smashing Pumpkins, we ended up using a rose-scented black tea because it kind of gave the right level of intensity that matched the bourbon. It adds like more ripe peach and melon notes and a little bit of like lychee elements to traditional bourbon. We wanted to make sure that the bourbon was still present, especially on the aroma and upfront on the palate. We didn't want to take away from like kind of the vanilla characteristics, but like you really get an additional mouthfeel, and in the mid palate, it just becomes more evident some of that rose influence. And then where I notice it the most is on the finish. It definitely helps elongate that finish and helps it to like shine through in a cocktail. With our Immortal Rye, we used our untraditional rye base, which does have some floral notes, and we thought that the Eight Immortals Dansung Oolong, because it's highly aromatic and roasted, we thought it'd be a perfect match. It kind of makes it a little bit rounder in the mouth, increases some of those poached pear and fruity properties, and also helps lengthen the finish and makes it a little bit more approachable for people who say they don't like rye whiskey. Oh,
All right. I'm sorry.
yeah, sorry, did I talk for too?
No,
Well,
no, no. I just thought you were done. Just keep going.
okay, okay. Um, I think one thing I should mention is we do work with nylon sacks and we create sort of giant tea bags. And we use it for our proofing water to bring down things from cask strength, which is about 123 to 131 proof down to 93 using tea. For our Smashing Pumpkins release, we just wanted to make the tea influence a little bit stronger. So we did also do a small whiskey steeping in addition to the tea in water for a more intense extraction. And it kind of helped get it to the right place. I think the most important thing to be aware of is that tea does contain tannins and you don't want to over extract because once you do, you can't remove it. And when working with brown spirits, you just want to make sure that that balance is right. So I think a good place for most people to start would be about like 1 to 3 grams of tea per cup of spirit. And that's all I have to say on that.
Awesome. Thanks, Erin. So Colin, let's talk coffee a little bit. Your coffee whiskey combines the best of two worlds. So walk us through that process, crafting this product. How did you dial in the recipe? And tell us a little about your coffee partner, Parlor Coffee.
Yeah, so Kings County used to make this kind of the second product that we ever launched was a chocolate infused moonshine, and we sourced the chocolate from Mass Brothers, and they were a Brooklyn chocolatier, and there was this great byproduct that they produced, which was the husk of the chocolate, which we infused into our chocolate whiskey. But eventually their business model changed and they moved upstate and very recently had a fire. And so we weren't able to really source the husks for that. And we were it was always a polarizing whiskey. It was very bitter. We had no sugar added to that. And so our team really wanted something that was easier to produce, that might kind of fill that void, which was kind of a dessert-oriented spirit. Also, as has been mentioned, and espresso martinis have been raging in popularity. And so if we could come up with something that was whiskey that would fill the place of a liqueur or even the vodka as the base spirit, what a cool thing to do. So our it was really our blending team is Ryan and Nathan. Really, Nathan, I think, was spearheading this effort to really get rid of the chocolate and replace it. And so he went out and tried a bunch of local cold brew options and eventually settled on Parlor, which is right next to us in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Very similarly craft artisan oriented roastery as we are to distilling. Um, and of course, it was the most expensive as a base ingredient. So, but we just kind of started from a place of let's taste it blind with a number of options and pick the best one. And so our process is to use mostly unaged whiskey, but some aged bourbon, and then proof it down with cold brew and a little bit of sugar. So it's not especially a complicated formula. And in the end, it is a coffee whiskey. It's not a liqueur. It doesn't have enough sugar to qualify as a liqueur. And there's a lot of opportunity within flavored whiskey that I think is fairly unexplored, especially on the high end of the market. So this has become really one of two whiskeys that we pitch to bars and restaurants, and has been very successful because it is so flavorful. And I think that's really the opportunity of coffee, especially, but tea and coffee are both very flavor forward ingredients, and whiskey tends to be a very flavor forward spirit. We see it play well in boulevardiers and kind of things that are heavily bitter, heavily flavor forward, spirit forward drinks, which I think we find that a lot of people in New York are looking for.
All right. So, Bob, I'm going to have you talk a little about both coffee and tea, uh, and specifically their role in liqueurs and gin, respectively. So first, let's talk about barista. What was your R&D process like for that? How did you select the right roast? And, specifically what difference does the roast make and how important is that? And just how much coffee goes into a bottle of barista?
Yeah, sure. So with this product, we started with the end in mind. Sometimes you mess around and you land somewhere interesting and you develop it. This one we were after something in particular, and what we wanted was something that would be very rich and complex. And we our favorite coffee liqueur of the mass-produced ones is Mr. Black. We think they do a nice job, particularly for the scale that they produce at. So we kind of were thinking in the beginning Mr. Black, but richer and a little bit and more complex. Um, when I work with a new botanical, I like to just play around with it and just kind of put it through paces and just see what it does in different and when you use it different ways. And so I'll macerate, I'll distill, I'll whatever's appropriate for a particular botanical. So I distilled coffee beans and I macerated them, and I found that the distillate was kind of interesting. And because we were shooting at Mr. Black, we're kind of starting from a cold brew base. So it made a lot of sense to do a cold brew base with to fortify that with the coffee distillate. One of the interesting things about the coffee distillate was for me that the flavor is very different. Like, you get that, right? When you macerate a botanical versus distill a botanical, you get similar, you get overlap, but you get differences in that. And I got a lot of oil with the distillate. I thought that was interesting. It looked like low wines. Like, you get that kind of funky stuff on the top of it when it's a low wine. And I got that with the coffee distillate. So that's the route we went. So then we had to pick a coffee. Um, My wife and I have been drinking the Cafe Castorino for about a decade. It's all we drink. It's a spectacular Italian espresso roast coffee, and it's a friend of mine. His family produces this in Salerno, Italy, and he imports it and distributes it here. And we started there, but we went to a bunch of local roasteries and we got coffees and we tried them, and it was the Castorino was just head and shoulders above the rest. If you're going toward that goal that we were for rich and complex, because it gives you chocolates and vanillas and just this really, really wide flavor profile. I had a friend since I'm not a coffee expert by any stretch of the imagination, but he was telling me that the thing about Italian coffees that's different from American coffees is that American coffees tend to use Arabica, 100% Arabica. You see that advertised, and his point of view is that that's not necessarily a good thing. That Arabica is the most expensive coffee, but not necessarily the most broad in terms of its flavor profile. And the Italians will use Robusto, and they'll combine Robusto with Arabica, and that's why you get those different flavors in there, and the chocolates and all those things that I found interesting in the Castorino. So we chose the Castorino, and all of those flavors came across. And because we were also distilling it, the fact that it had this broad flavor profile meant that the distillation, the distillate could contribute something very unique to the product. So we did a cold brew base of the Castorino, and we fortified that with a coffee distillate of the Castorino. And the end product, I mean, we're very happy with it. It's one of our most popular products, and we get a lot of positive feedback from our retail customers as well as our bars and restaurants on that. It's interesting because you know it, it's in one of the challenges we had because our tasting room is a bar and we made our espresso martini. We said let's go get the best coffee in Morristown and we'll feature, and we just couldn't make a good espresso martini from it. And we tried all of the best coffee places in our town, and we just couldn't get a good espresso martini. And finally, I don't know why he did it, but our general manager, our mixologist, went to Dunkin' Donuts and got Dunkin' Donuts espresso and used that in it. And all of a sudden, we had this great espresso martini. And looking at it, backward, um, the way I like to explain it is if you're a musician and you play in a band, if two people solo at the same time, doesn't matter how good the solos are, it's going to sound like hell, right? Somebody's got to lay back and somebody's got to solo. And somebody's got to provide a backbone and somebody's going to solo. And that's what we were dealing with that is that when you use this really robust coffee with our really robust coffee liqueur, they were both good, but they were clashing. So by going to a much simpler espresso in the espresso martini, so that's just something people have to know when they use our product. You asked how much coffee we use. I looked it up before we came on because I thought you may ask. For about 100 liters of finished product, we're using about 15 kilograms of coffee beans. And that's split between what we distill and fortify versus what we do for the cold brew base.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the afternoon the what's it called, afternoon tea, right?
Yes.
The afternoon tea, your gin. Um, Tell us about how the tea sort of behaves as a botanical in a gin. How do you select the right kind of tea for that? And just tell us a little about the process there with the maceration or with each botanical macerated individually. Did you do them together? Was there redistillation involved?
Yeah. So the way I described the way we used coffee in our barista was very similar to the way Erin described the way she uses tea, right? In what they're going for, because it's the featured botanical, right? You really want that thing to shine, and everything else that's the lead, right? Everything else is, keeping a backbeat, right? In afternoon tea, for us, it was flipped. Tea is a note. in a gin. And because it's gin, obviously juniper is going to be playing the lead. But we want our gin is very low juniper. And so we have other botanicals that sort of fill in and create an interesting flavor profile, one of which is tea. So we weren't going for pulling out all of the richness and all of the interesting flavors in tea. We just wanted that characteristic tea note to be there in this ensemble. And so for us, that we didn't have to be super fussy. We were more concerned with availability of supply and consistency of supply, and those more practical considerations, and less so about the complexity and whether if it's floral, it's going to get lost because all the other things in the gin you just never get it. In terms of the process, we for better or for worse, we don't use a gin basket. We do everything in the boiler. For me, it's fine, and we produce very good gins that way. It's just the way we do it. But what we do with the afternoon tea is I do a double shot. I don't double distill either of them, but I do a double shot where I spent a lot of time trying to find the proper separation of the botanicals into two batches, and I run two batches and I blend them in the end, and it just I find it you can better define some of the botanicals that way because they're not competing with other botanicals for vapor at a given at a given temperature. So that's so everything's done in the boiler. Two distinct distillations. We separate them, and I think of it as flowers and roots, hard stuff and soft stuff generally, and then I blend them at the end. In my London dry gin, I don't do any of that. One shot, all the botanicals in the boiler. But this was a product I just wanted a little bit more definition, so we did a double shot.
Great. And now I just want to ask each of you if you've got any tips on proper storage of tea or coffee. What do you have to keep in mind? Bob, any thoughts there?
Easy, dry and dark.
Um, Erin.
Exactly that. Keep it away from oxygen and moisture. It's the enemy. Keep it in a suitably sized container relative to how much you have left. And also try and keep it away from strong odors because like tea is like a sponge. You'll just pick up the aroma of anything near it. So like you know how if you leave tea in like your spice cupboard for a long time, it starts tasting like everything in your spice cupboard. Like you don't want that. So try and keep it separate and like with green teas, try and use them as soon as possible, like within a year. With all other tea, generally speaking, try and use it within 2 years. But for us, we try and just order what we need for each batch that we're doing.
Colin, anything about the coffee?
Yeah, I mean, I would say more or less. I mean, first of all, we don't even try to bring in coffee beans. We bring in the cold brew as it's already made, just to avoid that piece of the process. And then to use it right away. I mean, we buy it on a batch by batch basis. And so I would, I try to avoid storing anything for any amount of time because so many things can go wrong. So that's my advice there. But it's interesting to talk about. We don't really make any products with tea, but we had done some barrel aging of tea. We had a
Mm,
Japanese company that's based in Brooklyn, Itoen, come and
mm.
actually put the tea into a whiskey barrel, and then that was like an anniversary gift to their employees. So, I think that was the first time I'd heard of people barrel aging tea in a whiskey barrel. But it just reinforces the point that it will it will take on all the properties of its container, for
Mm.
better or for worse. But that was a really fun project that we did.
Great. And now let's move a little bit into the marketing education world. Education obviously is key when marketing any spirit, but these particular spirits are a little less conventional than some of the main categories. So, Bob, what are some of the biggest, most common questions you get from consumers as well as members of the trade about afternoon tea, and how do you answer those? So what really are the key components of your pitch for that product? And given that most of the adult drinking world has had some big brand coffee liqueur at some point, how do you convey the particular elements that set yours apart?
Yeah, sure. So, we'll start with the gin. We have two gins. We have a London Dry and we have a our afternoon tea gin. And when we developed the afternoon tea gin, right, this is early in my education, right? So I had the benefit of ignorance at this point. Um, we did a tasting. My wife and I put together 15 gins and we sent them out to a bunch of our friends. And this is during COVID, and we got on a conference call and we did a blind tasting and we all took notes and I compiled all the notes. And the first thing I noticed, the first thing that jumped out strongly was that all of the conventional gins, the Aviation, London, the Bombay Sapphire, Hendrix, all of the mainstream gins, um, everybody liked it. Nobody was offended by it. It was nobody's favorite and nobody hated it. Everybody was just, you know, it was, like white bread, like, it doesn't change your life and you don't mind it. And then all of the interesting boutique ones, we got like, oh, what's the one with the butterfly pea? Empress. I got Empress. We got something that was tea-based. We got one that had saffron and all these interesting ones. And everybody had strong opinions about it. They either loved it or they hated it. So what that meant to me is you have two classes of gins. You've got these boutique gins that try to do something really interesting, and you're gonna either people are gonna have a strong reaction to it, positively or negatively. And then you have your mainstream stream gins that just everybody's gonna like. Those are the ones you put in your cocktails. So for us, the way we position it is we have one of each. We have afternoon tea, which is our boutique one, low juniper. It's cardamom is the primary thing you get. It's floral on the nose. Most people like it, but it's not everyone's thing, right? And those who like it love it, and those who don't, take it or leave it. And then we have our London Dry Gin for everybody. So that's how we position it. Is that we have this portfolio where we have this boutique expression that's handcrafted and rich and subtle. And then we've got a mainstream gin that's your everyday working gin. The prices reflect it, the packaging reflects it, etc.
Okay, now on to barista and how you distinguish that from some more familiar brands.
That one's easy. The coffee is the star of the show. It- we love that coffee. Like I told you, my wife and I, that's all we drink, and the coffee is magnificent. I take a little bit of credit for developing it, but it's Italian espresso roast coffee that we import from Italy. It just has complex flavors. It's rich. It evolves in your mouth. It's it's a really it stands on its own. So that's how we promote that one.
Awesome. Now, Colin, would you say your product is more a whiskey for coffee drinkers or a coffee for whiskey drinkers? Is it a way to bring coffee drinkers into the whiskey category? And do you ever get any pushback from whiskey purists? So, like, what is the most
Mhm.
common misconception that you get about your product?
Well, the most common misconception is that it's distilled on a coffee still. I think the Nika coffee whiskey is
Hmm.
everyone's touchstone in whiskey, so they may not really fully understand what a coffee still is. So there's that little bit of confusion right out of the gate that is pretty specific to whiskey consumers. Then you get into the target audience for this product is bartenders. So, in that universe. But then the question is, well, why isn't it a liqueur? Why do I need a flavored whiskey? I've got this is a place we're bartenders. We come up with flavors. We don't need you to do the flavors. So once you get past that initial thing where you're sort of like, well, taste it next to whatever you were going to use as your coffee thing. I think people like the creativity to it once you get past that sort of initial um, let's say, hesitation around a flavored whiskey, which is sort of its TTB category is flavored whiskey. Um, so, there's a lot of people who would be purists who would maybe discount it for that reason. There are a few others in the space. Jameson has a coffee whiskey. A few spirits has a coffee whiskey. So, we're not starting from complete scratch. There's a little bit of an understanding that in this, 2025, this is not a crazy thing to put in front of people. Um, Maybe 10 years ago, it might have been met with a little bit of more suspicion. Um, but generally, what we're finding now that the coffee's been out for a little while, there's the on-premise audience, but then we've just started to dabble around in internet marketing. New York State has direct-to-consumer shipping, and the audience for coffee broadly has discovered this through sort of targeted ads, and it's become a really important direct-to-consumer product for us. And it's priced reasonably for that. So that's been sort of an interesting thing to discover. I mean, hopefully the idea of a coffee whiskey sells itself, and there's not that much education that has to go into it. I mean, that really we kind of picked it for that reason, is let's come up with some broadly appealing flavor that won't be particularly complicated to explain to people. And I think by that token, it is kind of working and it is finding its audience, but it's maybe not exactly the audience that it was designed to address.
All right. Now, Erin, you're someone who's lived in both the spirits and tea worlds. I'd like to get your thoughts on some of the biggest misconceptions about tea in general, and also how few communicates its role in the spirits you use it in. And, generally just make a pitch to other distillers who are considering using tea in their spirits.
Sure. I think most people, when they think about tea, they have never experienced a truly good cup of tea. So they tend to think of either iced tea or like a black tea that's been steeped in a mug for who knows how long. So they always think that tea is really bitter. Um, so I think they don't realize that there are like literally thousands of different types of tea. Hence, I continue to learn more about tea every day because there are so many kinds, and each has its own flavor nuances and optimum ways to prepare them. When we communicate about tea within our products at Few, we like to emphasize that we aren't making a flavored whiskey. It's bourbon or straight bourbon and straight rye with tea. So we like to let people know that it is a 4+ year old barrel aged product, and the tea kind of accentuates those characteristics and not takes them over. And then also, the tea used is a completely natural product. It's not artificially flavored at all. So I think people like that, especially because tea already has kind of this like health halo about it. People are well aware that tea has lots of antioxidants. So reminding people that it is natural makes people like it. Uh, so like I mentioned, because there are thousands of tea, there's infinite flavor possibilities when it comes to working with spirits. If you're developing a new mash bill, the turnaround time could be years until you have something if you're going to barrel age it. But by incorporating a tea, you can create a new product and turn it around in mere months or as fast as you can get your label developed and your TTB approval and all that. And it's also full of flavor, but low calorie. There's only 2 calories per cup of tea. So you can add a lot without any negative, I guess, calories like sugar.
Perfect. So I just want to remind everybody in the audience, if you've got any questions for our panelists, just put them into the chat box, and we'll get to as many of them as possible in the next few minutes. But before we get to that portion, I just want to talk a little about cocktails. So, you know, Colin, you mentioned Boulevardiers. Anything else you recommend that goes great with coffee whiskey?
Yeah, I mean, this was really conceived as something that might go into an espresso martini, and I think we have found that that is its sort of least and most boring use,
Hmm.
because it has so much flavor that it brings a kind of nice note to any more traditional whiskey drink that you would make with it. So old fashioned, Manhattan or Boulevardier tend to be where I think you see the most opportunity. Um, so, but it's really something that, the best thing about it is it's an opportunity for the bartender to play and come up with their own thing. And again, there's this little bit of a clash in the craft spirit space about the sort of authorship of a cocktail, and bartenders, I think, kind of like to you know, be the authors of their cocktail. And if you come in with like, oh, this is really good in XYZ, sometimes they'll sort of roll their eyes at you. So it depends on every sort of pitch, but really, I think once they taste it, then their minds start to work, and there's a lot of opportunities that come straight from that. So it's very cocktailable, but at the same time, I try not to plant too many suggestions other than very broad, very generic suggestions, and let people really play with it.
All right. Erin, give us some tea cocktails.
All right. Well, one of the benefits for us is we like to tell bartenders that, hey, there's already tea in this product. So, if they are like a busy bar or don't have a lot of prep space, it's like they already get like one of those flavors without stocking an extra ingredient. So they can make a lot of classic cocktails, whether it be an old fashioned or whiskey sour or paper plain, like I like to do. Um, and have tea already incorporated in the recipe. I mean, if they are willing and able, they can definitely intensify the tea already in the spirit using tea to create like simple syrups and cream, acidulants, juices, like anywhere you can like use water or liquid, you can use tea to infuse into the product. So I feel like the creativity is up to the bartender. They can even make tea ice cubes if they want. So,
Nice. And Bob, let's get, at least one for afternoon tea and one for barista.
Well, first of all, I want that goddamn Boulevardier. Now that you mentioned it, I'm slobbering. Um, so on afternoon tea, as I mentioned, we operate a cocktail bar as our tasting room, and I'm very privileged to have one of the best mixologists in New Jersey and run that. And so when we develop our spirits, we always test it in the bar, right? One of my favorites for the afternoon tea gin is a variation on an east side that Robbie came up with. We call it the South Street South Side because South Street's a street near our place. But it's an east side. It's got the cucumber, and the cucumber with the cardamom is really really nice. But anything that cardamom and it's floral. So those two things, if it plays well with the other things in the cocktail, it really accentuates the cocktail. But as I said before, it's polarizing. We've made some cocktails with it, and it's playing lead at the same time that something else is playing lead, and it just doesn't work. And we go back to our London dry gin. So when it works, it's stunning, and when it doesn't work, we go to the London dry. On the barista, we make a coffee Negroni. And given the complexity of our coffee liqueur and the complexity of the Amaro that's in in the Negroni. It just really goes together, and it's very chewy and rich. That's my personal favorite. And you know it's good because the first time I tasted it, like I love everything Robbie does. He's spectacular, and he put this coffee Negroni down, and I sipped it, and I went, Robbie, this is awful. It's horrible. We can't put this on the menu. And I put it to the side, and we did other things. And by the third sip, I'm like, holy shit, man, that thing's really, really good. So you just sort of have to let the bitter kind of settle in and the coffee settle in. And when it does, man, it's something else. But given that it's a rich version of a coffee liqueur, any cocktail that you use any kind of a coffee liqueur in, this will just do it better. It'll make it richer anyway.
All right. We do have some audience questions we can get to now. Let's see what's on their minds. Um, which is more temperamental to use, coffee or tea, to work with? I mean, and since you work with both, Bob, why don't you tell us?
I struggle more with coffee, and it's simply because it's the thing. For me, it's really hard to screw up the tea because it's one of 15 botanicals in a gin, and you're not exactly dialing it. And once you get it composed in a recipe, it works. But the coffee's hard to work with, and filtration has been the biggest part of the development of that product. We do a lot of haze filtering because we in our liqueurs we do a lot of macerated liqueurs, and so we get a lot of flocculation and clarification, and filtering is something I spent a lot of time coming up with a tight regime so I could use it across a bunch of products. But coffee is its own thing. You get sediment. If you've ever drank Mr. Black, there's sediment. And the question is, can you minimize it without taking out, what's the balance of minimizing that sediment versus removing flavor from the product? So I think, in that sense, for filtration, coffee's challenging, unless you're distilling it, right? But if you're using it in a maceration or an extraction, then it's a challenge.
Great. And anybody else have anything to add to that, or you're pretty much in agreement?
I think because we use a cold brew concentrate, the tea is a little more fussy for us, but I think it's just the format of what we're working with.
Exact flip. Yeah.
And Colin, you've already said you get it in cold brew form, so it probably makes it a little easier, right?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely designed this product to be easy. Having
Hmm.
suffered through a product that was extremely difficult to filter, that ended up on shelves with like tons of sediment and haze, we really wanted something that would uh, reflect the evolution of our business to a point where we wanted everything on the shelf to look nice and to be sort of the same batch to batch, etc. So it's been a joy to work with coffee
And
versus
I will say,
yeah.
that approach, if you can, I would tell you, we don't. But if you can, use an extract, buy your cold brew if you can.
Mm,
One of the big challenges for us is we do a cold brew, and I had to come up with a way of doing a cold brew extraction without buying a very expensive, large piece of equipment that I don't have the room or the budget for. And you have never had a stuck sparge like a coffee stuck sparge. It just packed and
mhm.
yeah, that's a couple days I don't ever want to think about. So if you're not trying to really feature the coffee the way that Erin and Colin described, using purchased extract or concentrate is absolutely the way to go. It's a whole thing that you don't want to get the expertise, the skills, the filtering, the equipment, if you can avoid it.
Great. Got another question here. We talked about storing things in, dry and dark places. This question relates directly to temperature and humidity. Are temperature and humidity a factor when it comes to flavor or extraction in either tea or coffee? I mean, I know you're all pretty much in relatively humid parts of the country, so um, Erin, you want to answer this one first?
Sure. Humidity is not really a problem when it comes to preparation for us. It's just a storage issue that you have to be careful with it. When it comes to temperature, we try to do like a cold or ambient extraction just in our warehouses using cold filtered water because you get less of the bitter components and less tannins doing a cold extraction. You also get a little bit more of the sweet and umami elements of tea. So it's kind of safer way to do it. And you also get less caffeine extraction that way as well.
Okay. All right. There's one other question here that I wanted to get to. What is one key moment, cocktail or publicity, that's helped your coffee or tea product gain traction? If there's any one particular thing that you can kind of credit or any confluence of things that you credit, let's ask this to Colin first.
Yeah, I'll take it. This is a product that hasn't gotten a lot of publicity, so I will just say that it's really been more of a word of mouth thing. But the big breakthrough for us came when Clemente Bar, which is part of 11 Madison Park, they just reached out to us and said, we want to carry this product in our bar. There was no pitching, there was no, they just found it on their own. They said, we want this in this particular cocktail. And they've had it on the menu since they've opened. And as a as a person who is constantly trying to sell this product to any number of places, to have somebody understand it implicitly, come to you. We do self-distribution in New York, so it's not an easy thing for somebody to seek out and purchase. It's not in any of the books. They just have to ask us directly. So that was very gratifying to have a bar with that kind of reputation and that kind of obsession with cocktail making
Hmm.
to just come to us and say, we want this. And it's been a very low fuss account, which is great. Um, but I'll also say they've started making those little ceramic versions of the paper coffee cups, and a number of bars around New York take that as the vessel in which this is served.
Huh.
So it's kind of a cool, fun thing to have like a ceramic version of the paper cups that everybody's kind of familiar with. The like Greek, we are happy to serve you things. So it's been great. It's cool that that exists at a time when people are wanting to use it and we have the right spirit for it. So that's been great.
All right, Erin, do you have anything you care to share on this?
I think um, a lot of people who are into whiskey, which our products are, uh, tend to just be curious about like what's kind of new. And so like there's not a lot of tea whiskeys on the market. There's probably like maybe three, I don't know.
Hmm.
And ours are a couple of them. And so I think people see it on the shelves and like it doesn't have any friends. So they're like, what is that? And then they get curious. And I guess it doesn't hurt that for our second release with the Smashing Pumpkins, they are promoting it. They have a tea shop here in Chicago, and um, I think I guess that feels kind of cheating, having a big name, you know.
Yeah.
All right. Bob, do you have anything you wanted to weigh in on this?
No, we're a year and a half into our journey, and we haven't broken out. We're struggling like hell to get any attention from anybody,
Mm,
frankly. But I will say that, people understand what a coffee liqueur is. You don't have to sell them on the concept. We just slide it across the table, taste it, And if they want to know why it's that good, we'll explain about the Italian roast and
Mm.
coffee distillate and all that. But it's we lead with flavor.
Speaking of which, Bob, we just got a question from Lou Bryson. He says, I probably missed this, so apologies, but how big, significant are Bob's barista sales? I was just talking to a Wisconsin distiller whose coffee spirit has blown up to 57% of their total sales, which is wild. I mean, I guess if you had a percentage, what would you say it would be?
Gosh, I don't know. But we offer it in the 750 and 1 liter, one for retail, one for hospitality. It's a significant part of our hospitality business because people really do like it. But again, I would caution taking anything I say. Don't extrapolate it because we're tiny and we're struggling. And I don't think it's indicative. Your mileage will absolutely vary. Yeah.
Um, Also, Bob, somebody said, because you mentioned a hiccup with the TTB, he's just asking, could everyone say a little more about your experience with the TTB regarding coffee and tea? Obviously, this is a weird time considering the government's shut down right now, but uh, Erin, are
So
there any issues there?
our products are just submitted as distilled specialty spirits since because of the addition of the tea and coffee, they don't qualify to be regular bourbon or regular rye.
Hmm. And I know, Colin, you mentioned that yours is like classified as flavored whiskey. So that does that make you? And since it's coffee, I mean, I guess
Yeah,
people
I
know.
mean, some of our other whiskeys say flavored on them.
Mm,
For whatever reason, TTB did not want us to use that art formulation, so it just says coffee whiskey, which is we're thrilled with that. It's so much easier to sell something that says coffee whiskey as opposed to coffee flavored whiskey. And I think we just got an examiner who was wrong, but since it works in our favor, we will take it. And so that
mm.
no issues with the formulation and no issues with the concept of it. But in terms of how it's articulated on the label is always a little bit of a crapshoot with TTB. This one broke in our favor.
Right. And really, the last question we got was people just wanted to know the size of each of your organizations. I know you are of varying sizes here. They just want to know like overall number of employees you have, including admin, marketing employees. Um,
I'll go first. I'm easy. We're
yeah.
tiny. We're tiny. My wife runs the business, and I do all the distillation and operations myself. And we have a general manager and 4 bartenders for our tasting room. And me and my GM do the sales. We go out on the road and try to sell. We're small gets.
Erin, I know Few's a little bit bigger.
Well, like we're part of a larger organization, but from I guess production and bottling, packaging, there's only four of us altogether, so we kind of do a little bit of everything. And for the marketing side, we get support from Heaven Hill, but I think that's in transition right now. So yeah, trying to wait and figure that out.
Cool.
Mhm.
And Colin.
Yeah, we have about usually it's an average of 35 people on payroll, but that includes a lot of tour guides and part-time bottlers and bartenders. In terms of full-time equivalent, we're probably about 18 to 20 people.
All right. And I believe that wraps up the questions we have, and we are just about to hit the hour, so it's a great time to wrap up. Uh, you know, Before we go, I'd like to remind everyone to check out the latest issue of Craft Spirits Magazine. And the issue before that, we talked specifically about tea, so definitely check that one out. And if you don't receive it, just head over to craftspiritsmag.com and sign up for a free digital subscription. And I'd also like to remind everybody that registration is still open for the 2026 ACSA Craft Spirits Competition. Head over to americancraftspirits.org to enter. The deadline is less than a week away on October 20th. Also, if you're an ACSA member, you get a special discounted rate. So if you're a member, be sure to log into the website before you enter so you can access that rate. And if you're not a member, there's no time like the present to become one. And finally, I'd like to once again thank our amazing panelists today, Bob, Erin, and Colin. And of course, I'd like to thank all of you for attending today's edition of the Craft Spirits Roundtable. Enjoy the rest of your day and cheers.